30-Odd Minutes is sponsored in part by Digital Dowsing. Who are you powered by?
For the next 30 minutes, we will explore the unexplained. From mysteries beyond our galaxy to ghostly phenomena in our own backyard. We will dive into our psychic abilities and explore everything from conspiracies to the just plain weird. Welcome to 30-Odd Minutes. If the truth is out there, we will find it. But only by sheer accident.
Oh, man.
Yeah, shake that one off.
Another fine landing. Where are we?
Well, it looks like we are on the surface of the moon.
You know, it makes sense that we would be here on the moon, considering, 45 years ago, last month?
Yep.
The Apollo landing, Neil Armstrong,
That's
Buzz Aldrin right behind us.
That's right.
Remember watching it from our ship?
It was adorable. Like you said, the way they popped around like that.
They were so cute.
It was cute.
Right out our window, we got to see that. That was amazing. And another anniversary, 34 years ago, in August of 1977.
The WOW code.
The WOW code. Folks, if you don't know much about the WOW code, look it up. It was an intercepted radio, a space radio broadcast that's, seemed to have some intelligent math behind it.
Yeah, it just wasn't a stray signal. It looked like it had intelligence and guided.
And it's called the WOW code because, of course, it was circled and the word WOW was written by it, and we haven't been able to pick it up since. Maybe we haven't broadcast it since.
Or just didn't get picked up for another season.
I'm not saying the mothership's responsible for that broadcast, but I'm not saying we're not responsible.
No.
I'm saying it's possible. But tonight we're talking about the moon and lots of anomalies.
Lots of odd mysteries on the moon.
Many songs written about it.
That's right.
We've found ourselves staring at it at times.
Sure.
It's beautiful. There's a lot to say, and Dr. Dreck has his own theories. Take a look.
Greetings, oddballs. Dr. Dreck here. We're talking about structures on the moon. Now, I find that very intriguing, and we've all seen, pictures of some of these structures, like, this one, and this one, and this one, and I figured that there was a better way to look at them, and of course, I had to invent something, so I invented a major mini telescope, which makes me see even better what's the structures on the moon are. Now, let me take a good look, and geez, there's nothing there. So, wait a minute. Gee, let's see. Oh, boy. Aha. Just as I suspected. Take a look at that. Ha! Starbucks on the moon. Now admit it, you're not surprised, are you? I'm not. But what is surprising is that I found out that their Lunar lattes cost $78 a cup. I mean, even on the ship here, Andy sells them to me for $60 a cup. I mean, I never would have thought that was a bargain.
It makes sense.
It's good coffee.
Starbucks is everywhere. Yeah. It totally makes sense.
Worth it.
All right. It's kind of weird. Something feels kind of rattling around here. Engine room, can we get a damage report? What's going on?
We got a little bit of cheese dust in the intake, and at least I found a good parking spot.
Yeah, but I'm looking here as this could be handicap parking, but...
that would fit us.
No worries. We'll be out of here in 30 minutes. Yeah. We're always quick. All right, let's jump into this. There's a lot to say. For millions of years, the moon has watched over the Earth. Totally true. Wouldn't you say?
I would say.
Totally say. There's no denying that if an extraterrestrial intelligence wanted to observe us, it's a great place to watch from. But is there evidence of artificial bases and structures on the lunar surface? Has that evidence been right under our noses in official NASA photographs and video? Tonight's guest says it is. Our guest is a writer, researcher, and commentator who serves as director of research for UFO Magazine. He's a former law enforcement officer and criminal investigator with over 10 years of experience. Since 2004, he's been the host of Dark Matter Radio 5 nights a week, and you've seen him on Larry King Live, Hard Copy, Entertainment Tonight, Extra, the Syfy Channel, and tonight he's all ours. Please welcome live from Los Angeles, California, Don Ecker.
Hey, welcome, Don.
It's great to be here, guys. How you doing?
Doing great. Thank you for joining us here on the Mothership. Don, let's just jump right into it. Why haven't we been back to the moon since 1972? Or have we?
Well, that's an absolutely excellent question, and that's a question that NASA has basically been avoiding for all those years, for 40-plus years. Actually, when we went there, the last mission in 1972, Apollo 17, we had several more missions ready to go. The equipment was built, the astronauts trained, and they never lifted off. Now, when queried by the public, by interested parties, NASA said, well, after we touched down with Apollo 11, went back with Apollo 13, 14, 15, 16. Of course, you know, Apollo 13 never did touch down. They had almost a catastrophic failure. We were able to get them back. But we went up through Apollo 17, and then they just simply pulled the plug. And with no explanation other than the American people lost interest. Well, guys, I got to tell you, I went to Vietnam twice. And my first trip there, I lost interest 15 minutes after I got there. Guess what? They didn't bring me back. So, you know, there's got to be something more to it than that. I personally suspect that they encountered things up there that they were not ready to deal with. And basically, that's why we haven't been back. Now, if you were around then, you will also know that not only were we trying to get there, the Soviet Union, the other superpower on planet Earth, was busting every record trying to get up there. They never did go, period, after we went. So that was another thing that basically had me extremely curious about it.
So here's the thing. We're going to be talking about some alleged structures that seemed artificial in origin on the moon. You're going to see some amazing photos. Stay with us. But let's consider this. Millions and millions of years of lunar history.
Right.
And 41 months is the span of time between Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin and Apollo 17. Just 41 months, just a couple of years is the time span that we were up there. So if like we said before, this is a very strategic point if you wanted to observe Earth.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you got to
definitely. You
got a very clear access. So let's talk about, though, NASA did some reports even before they sent men to the moon. They did Operation Moonblink, right? Mm-hmm. And there was a couple of reports they did, and of course document R277, which was a study of anomalous phenomena on the moon.
That's technical report 277, yes.
Right. Don, tell us about what did they find in this report?
Well, you had to have been there to experience it at the time, and I was just a young kid at the time. But I remember vividly, there were a lot of people that were really excited about going to space after President Kennedy challenged the country in 1961-62 that we could put a man on the moon and return him safely. And suddenly, it just blew up. The technology started going absolutely breakneck speed. Now, there were also other things going on at the time, some involving, of all things, UFO sightings and research. Back in those days, there were some very important people taking a very in-depth look at that. People like Major Donald Keyhoe and the NICAP organization. And the majority of people that sat on NICAP's board were all former military personnel. And I'm talking about some very high personnel, including the first director of the CIA, the National Investigative Committee on Aerial Phenomena. And of course, the moon was one of those places that people, astronomers from all over the globe and people here in this country were looking at, because even then there were very odd reports coming out about domes on the moon. Occasionally, astronomers seeing bright lights on the moon, things that by all accounts should not have been there. Now, NASA, when they were getting ready to launch from the Mercury program through Gemini, finally to Apollo, they conducted, and they sent out to have conducted an investigative report on lunar transient phenomena. That's where the NASA technical report basically bore in. And what they did was the scientists that conducted that report went back over 400 years of reports by world-class astronomers all over the globe that had observed very odd, very unusual sights on the moon. Everything from clouding on the moon to lights that would suddenly flare up in various craters to people seeing what looked like things basically flying over the moon. Now, you put all that together, I have to believe that when they went up there, that they were not, when I say they, I'm talking about the powers that be, not necessarily the astronauts, but the powers that be in NASA at that time and in the military-industrial complex, I believe were very interested in what might be found up there, what might be reported on. Now, back in the early 90s, when I first became involved in conducting lunar research, it's back when I was still the director of research for UFO Magazine, a publication begun by my wife in 1986, that I discovered a report that I announced on my then radio program and took a lot of heat about it until I proved that I was absolutely correct. We discovered that when the first astronauts went up to the moon, and you guys are not going to believe this, but it's true, they were carrying weapons on board. They were carrying firearms. Now, I don't know what good that might have done on the lunar surface, but they were armed. Now, when I queried NASA and talked to the NASA spokesperson back then, I asked them, why would the astronauts go to the moon with weapons? And basically what they were carrying were .45 caliber automatic pistols, the military service pistol. I was told by the spokesperson then, this is about 1992-93, that NASA said when they were coming back from their lunar excursion that if by chance they had a problem in re-entry and they landed in a jungle or something, well, you know, that way they would at least have some means to protect themselves. And I asked him, I said, wait a minute. When they were going to the moon and coming back from the moon, guys, I said, look, we didn't land on land. The capsules were not set up for that. We always landed in the ocean. As a matter of fact, the mission was designed with an ocean landing. They always had aircraft carriers and ships out there, helicopters. I don't know if you guys may remember that or not,
sure,
but that's the way it was handled. And he had no comeback for that. So I looked at it as, you know, as just another flimsy excuse to circumvent something he really didn't want to talk about.
No, of course. And
strange.
I mean, it's fascinating, the stuff that adds up. Let's look at one of these images because I'm sure people are dying to see it. Eric, if you could bring up our first image. Don, tell us what we're looking at here.
That is the Mare Crisium photograph. And if you can zoom in, you'll see a circle on the right-hand side of the picture, roughly between 2 and 2:30. We'll get there. That's more toward the center of the photograph. You'll see a structure there that I call the castle wall. You'll see an arrow pointing directly down at it. I call it the castle wall because it kind of looks like the battlement on a castle wall. And coming out of it, you'll see a spar or a protruding pole with a round object on the end of it. A very unusual photograph. Now, I've got a story about that particular object. Originally, I got this photograph from somebody that had been involved in lunar research going back to the late 1970s after the publication of a book by a science writer by the name of George H. Leonard. Mm-hmm. My friend was a guy by the name of Jim Sylvan. And when he knew that I had an interest, I was really interested in this phenomena, he sent me a series of photographs. And he pointed that out to me initially when I got these pictures. And he said, you know, Don, I had a really unusual story about this. He said, you know Alan Shepard, the astronaut? And I said, well, no, I don't know him, but I know who you mean. He said, well, Shepard, I believe his last mission that he flew was Apollo 17. He was down in Florida at the time, and Shepard was giving a lecture or a book signing down there, and my friend Jim went down to see him. Now, he took that photograph, had it blown up, and had it mounted on a board. And he said, you know, I thought this was a great opportunity to get an actual NASA astronaut to comment on this. So after the lecture was over and Shepard was signing books and what have you, Jim waited until he was at the end of the line, went up to Admiral Shepard. He was an admiral, rear admiral, retired. And he said, sir, he said, I would like to see if you would sign this photograph of Mare Crisium. So Shepard took it, he signed it, and Jim said, by the way, sir, he said, I've got a question for you. Can you tell me what that is? And he pointed to that structure that we were just looking at. Jim told me that Shepard looked down, saw that, handed the photograph back to him, shrugged his shoulders, and walked away. Wouldn't even address it. So, very unusual.
Right.
Now, if you watched the lunar program that was on the Syfy Channel, Aliens on the Moon, The Truth Exposed, which aired on July 20th, I was the research producer on that.
Right.
Now, in my opinion, there were some very good things in that, and there was also some crap in that broadcast. The crap I had nothing to do with. As a matter of fact, at the time, I was adamantly opposed to it. And I'm talking about the business about Apollo 18, 19, 20, the lunar female body, supposedly. I mean, that's been proven to be a total hoax, which I think took away from the rest of the show. But be that as it may.
Right.
On that particular broadcast, you will remember that they had Buzz Aldrin on there. Aldrin refused to look at any of these photographs and comment on camera.
Yeah, I noticed that. I mean, I did watch the entire. I watched the entire documentary, and that was interesting. That he wouldn't weigh in either way on any of them. But he was very much. It seemed to be of the opinion, like, let's ask more questions. Let's go back there. That was the only thing.
He wanted to talk about the Martian moonlet Phobos and the obelisk on the supposed obelisk on the Martian moon Phobos. Right. But, I mean, good Lord, we had how many weird objects on the lunar surface that we have photographs of? And incidentally, I might state, from NASA archives. Right. They're not photographs that I took or photographs that the other producers took. You know, these are actual NASA photographs, and he didn't want to comment on them. And he was one of the first people to ever step foot on another planet, the moon. So, you know, I found that extraordinarily unusual.
And one of the interesting things that was brought up in this documentary was that there was a policy in place that it was researched. You know, let's say we found little green men everywhere, and they said, you know, here we are. Would you want to tell the world that, or would we have a responsibility to hide it because people would freak out?
Right.
And that's a fair question even today. Even today, if you knew for certain, would you want to tell the world? Is the world ready to hear that kind of information? What do you think, Don?
Well, I think that people are still murdering and massacring each other over tribal godheads if you look around the planet.
Sure.
So I would be careful who I would tell. But if you're talking about this country, the United States, or Western Europe, or Great Britain, I think the public could accept that. It would depend, however. If, for example, you were talking about the WOW signal, the SETI program. Now, as a matter of fact, guys, right now I'm working on a paper dealing with that very thing, with SETI, and the fact that we, the human race, has been engaging in SETI programs since 1959, 1960 with Frank Drake, right? Now, with the exception of only 2 or 3 times, anomalous signals have not been discovered or announced. Now, as a matter of fact, a few years ago, I debated Dr. Seth Shostak up in the Bay Area here in Northern California on a television show concerning why SETI and why actual genuine UFO researchers, and let me state legitimate researchers, because good Lord, we know that there are a lot of people out there that call themselves ufologists that are not that legitimate, but real legitimate people that are geared toward the technological aspects and the scientific aspects of research. And why can't SETI and these UFO researchers get together? Now, SETI traditionally has been sneering at us. But if you look now, it's been going on close to 55 years that the SETI people have been looking for a signal. It's been a graveyard out there, as quiet as a graveyard. Now, anybody that's ever looked through a telescope will tell you the universe is so vast that most human beings literally cannot wrap their head around it. Does it make sense that we are the only sentient beings, for example, in our galaxy, or even 1,000 light years in any direction from our solar system? I don't think so. So what is the reason that we haven't really, at least publicly, discovered anything? And I came across something called the Harrison scenario that was proposed by a British cosmologist back about 1980, 1981. And basically what he suggested was, well, yeah, there's undoubtedly a lot of life out there. Why haven't we discovered it? He suggested the possibility, what if there were a super predatory race, xenophobic to the nth degree, that when they discover other sentient races emerging, or even at the initial steps of technological advance, that they snuff them out? That could be one reason. So at any rate, I found that highly intriguing and extremely fascinating. So I've been working on that. But that is the possibility of one reason why we may not have discovered anything yet.
Right. No, and I mean, like you said, too, to say that there be no other sentient life in the universe would mean the universe is horribly inefficient, and it's proven to be anything but that. I mean, it's of course, that would make no sense. All right, I want to look at another image. This one to me is even more fascinating. Eric, if you could bring up number 4, this pipeline, and if you could explain this one to us, Don. Tell us what we're looking at here.
Okay, what we are looking at is a photograph that back in 1996, just about the time that I was leaving my first radio show I had done for about 5.5 years out here in California, I had a very good friend who was a ham radio buddy. And he was somebody with an extra license. In other words, he was as high in ham radio as you could go. Talked to people literally all over the globe. Had a very good friend that worked at JPL. And my buddy knew that I was just, scrounging around trying to find some lunar photographs. So he talked to his friend, who was a scientist over there. The guy went to, they have archives at JPL, went to the archives, grabbed about 150 photographs, and took them over to my buddy Bill's house. And he said, look, you can look through these, He said, but you can't keep them. I do have to take them back, but here, knock yourself out. So Bill called me up, and I went up there, and we went through these photographs. Now, this is one that we discovered, and I got to tell you, when I saw it, I was literally knocked off my feet. This shows what appears to be an artificial pipe that is running underneath the surface. It goes through that crater, and if you follow it, you can actually follow a line to the second red circle where you will see an extension protruding from an overhang that has been running under the surface. It's obviously artificial, the extension. Now, what is that? God only knows. I have no idea. But I would stake my last $5 on the fact that that is artificial. Now, if it is artificial, guys, hey, this would be considered the smoking gun that, hey, somebody is up there and probably has been up there for a very long time. Now, let me address that for just a moment. People here on the planet have been seeing anomalous objects in the skies since people first came out of the cave.
Sure.
Okay? They've been seeing inexplicable things. Now, over the years, with people like Eric von Däniken, whether you think he's a good researcher, a bad researcher, whatever, has been beating the drum about ancient aliens. Aliens that have been here since there have been people here. Now, if that's true, does it make sense that if these, in fact, are extraterrestrial, that every time they want to come to planet Earth, they fly from their star system to here? Or would it make much more sense that they have bases that they operate out of right here in the solar system? And two of the places that would make the most sense are our moon and the planet Mars. And there have been things that have been seen and discovered with Mars also. So that's the working hypothesis,
sure,
that if there is something up there, it is more than likely an operating base by somebody else.
Don, we've got about 30 seconds. I want to bring up one possibility. Do you accept any possibility that maybe these are structures that are so ancient they were built by humans thousands of years ago before an advanced civilization crumbled and we've crawled back to where we are now? Do you think that's a possibility?
Anything is possible at this point. That certainly is one possibility. One of the people that I had on the program, that I brought into the program, was a guy by the name of Vito Sicari. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, they didn't give Vito a near large enough slot to talk about what he saw. But, yeah, he saw some photographs back in '79 in Houston, and he suggested strongly that a lot of these look very, very ancient. So, sure, that's a possibility.
I love it. Don, thank you so much for joining us tonight on 30-Odd Minutes. There's so much more to this, and I invite you all to jump on the internet, go Google some of this stuff. There's many more images you can see. We just touched on a couple of them. There's so much out there. Check out Don's radio show. We'll have links to his website from ours. And, of course, we'll keep exploring.
Yeah.
There's a lot of moon out there.
A lot.
There's a lot more missions ahead. Folks, thank you all for joining us from the engine room, from here on the flight deck. Stay odd.